We have coming up in the next several weeks 2 events that are fitting into our theme this year, which is revolution, exclamation point. That every year the center selects a theme around which all of our programming is based. And this year it is revolution. And on Monday, the 24th of October, we have a showing, the first of our Revolution film series. It's the film Persepolis, the animated story of a young woman's growing up in revolutionary Iran. And that'll be at 6 o'clock next Monday over at the Wallstein Auditorium. And I should mention that last year when we had the film series over there, we thought we would offer candy. And it was the biggest response. People said, wow, a box of jujubes for nothing? For nothing. This is all part of the free package. And so behind this door, locked, we have a 3-film festival supply of movie candy. So I only say this to you, you don't want to tell your friend because, you know, but next Monday, 6 o'clock, Wallstein Auditorium, the film Persepolis. October 9th, here in Clark Hall, we have the internationally renowned socioanthropologist Arjun Appadurai, who will be talking about revolutions and what comes after them. He is here on the 9th at 6 o'clock. And today we have an overflow audience here, or we hope we have an overflow. We are live streaming, not just to the room upstairs, but out into the internet. And this is what the microphone is for. And we will be live streaming a number of our events this year. And now we come to today, for which the transition. And Henry Adams, a professor of American art in our Department of Art History, received his BA from Harvard University and his MA and PhD from Yale, where he received the Francis Blanchard Prize for the best doctoral dissertation in art history. Adams is the author of over 300 scholarly articles ranging over the American field from the 17th century to the present, as well as numerous books, among them Eakins Revealed, in which the American artist Andrew Wyeth described as, quote, without question, the most extraordinary biography I have ever read on an artist. His most recent publication is Tom and Jack, The Intertwined Lives of Thomas Hart Benton and Jackson Pollock. Dr. Adams has served as curator of fine arts at the Carnegie Museum of Art in Pittsburgh, as curator of American art at the Nelson Atkins Museum in Kansas City, and as curator of American art at the Cleveland Museum of Art, where in 2001 he received the Northern Ohio Live Visual Arts Award for the best exhibition of the year in Northern Ohio. More recently, in 2010, he received the Lifetime Achievement Award of the Cleveland Arts Prize. It's my pleasure to welcome my colleague and friend, Henry Adams. Henry, take my hand.
Thanks very much, John. This event celebrates the fact that Dexter Davis is currently having an exhibition down at the William Busta Gallery, which is right here in Cleveland, located at 2731 Prospect, which is basically, if you're driving down Prospect just before you get to the interstate, it's on the right. And I hope that most or all of you will have an opportunity to see that show, which is a marvelous one. I wrote a small statement for the flyer of the exhibition, and I'm hoping to develop that into a larger piece of writing about Dexter Davis, which is why this is a work in progress. I'm conceiving this mainly as a conversation. We have two people here. One is Dexter Davis, the artist, and also his art dealer, William Busta, who's played an extraordinary role in creating a live art community in Cleveland. In theory, his gallery is a profit-making enterprise. In practice, it makes, I think, just enough profit to keep the good work going, and any extra profit goes into trying to do more for regional artists. I've gotten to know Dexter Davis in pieces, and it's taken me a while to put those pieces together, which is what I'd like to work on a little bit today. There's a museum guard named Dexter Davis who I've known for years, who I've chatted with when I was going through the galleries of the museum. Then there's an artist named Dexter Davis who creates powerful and sometimes rather scary images of faces and masks and ghosts and other things. And finally, there's an African American named Dexter Davis who grew up in a very tough part of Cleveland in a neighborhood where once when he was sitting on the front porch, some people drove up and dropped a dead body off in the front yard. I think we're dealing with a lot of powerful issues here, including some uncomfortable issues about what it's like to grow up in poverty, about social injustice, about racial injustice, and about the urban decay of cities like Cleveland. I think we're also dealing with many of the wonderfully positive things about art. And as I say, I'm thinking of this as a conversation. I'm going to start off by asking Dexter and Bill a few questions. Yeah, why don't you stand up? I'll sort of step in the background. I thought we could start off with this image of food and money, and Dexter could tell us a little bit about what it's about.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Henry. I'm very happy to have this opportunity to talk to everyone about this special exhibition. I had done many shows in Cleveland and elsewhere, and one of the things that's special about this particular show is highly personal. And after so many years of doing art and living in a community, you sort of feel a need to you feel like you need to do something about the community. And seeing the fact that I'm from the community, I felt even more so or more compelled to do so. This whole series of works comes from work that I had done many years ago that was based off of a series called the War Series. And I just felt that this particular show, I would say, sort of escalate the experiences that I had many years. Starting off with the War Series, which was more a straightforward printmaking, but it was more about the ideal behind the actual work. And most of my work, I always find it as being symbolic of life and all my experiences. But in most cases, in the beginning works, they were more, the idea was more symbolic. It didn't get so personal. But I felt the need to become more personal with this particular show. Because, after so many years of living in a city and seeing how things are constantly changing, you feel almost the need to do something or say something about something that is very personal and dear to you. And after seeing so many people die and understanding some of these people that I try to reach out to and talk to, and they feel totally hopeless, like nothing can help them. And then they'll look at me and say, I wish I had what you have. that's heartbreaking to me. You know, it's very heartbreaking that people feel so desperate that there's no hope, you know. So this show is sort of from that. It's many stages to get to this point, you know, and this show is considered a highly personal show. And Food and Money was one of the first images that came from the ideal behind doing the show. Food and Money is basically a autobiographical study in one aspect of my life where when I was growing up in Huff. And East 89th is the street that I grew up on in Cleveland. And it went through so many stages through my growing up. There were times when my mother and father, when they were together, my father worked at Republic Steel. And my mother was more like a housewife. And she basically, she was really into the church. And there were times which I hated. She would take me down to the church to clean the church, and I wanted to be out playing with my friends. But she installed a great dignity inside of me and made me care about people. And I would never forget her for that. And this particular piece talks about that time period where things were getting so terrible in my neighborhood. It was from somewhat a working class neighborhood, and then afterwards when the Huff riots and all those things sort of damaged the neighborhood. And I remember, and I know I talked to some of my other siblings, and everybody has a different recollection of what had happened because I was very young. But I do remember there were a lot of problems stemming from Little Italy, and people were being thrown, bodies were being thrown in our neighborhood because of the racial climate. And I remember that one morning when some gangsters or whatever came and they threw a guy's body out and happened to throw it in front of my house. But Food and Money sort of embodies all those things. It's basically about how desperate things got in my life and how at one point some people got together from my family and elsewhere and had to actually commit a robbery to feed the family. And I was a kid at the time, but I remember I was just happy to get a box of Cracker Jacks when they brought everything back. And it was, to me, it was such a desperation, but I feel that, you know, people should not have to get to that point where it's so desperate that, you know, a crime should be committed. And I think education is a very important part in making people aware of these things and how situations can get so critical. I hope I didn't go too far.
That's good. Why don't we talk a bit about this one?
Tree is actually, I think, is a positive, because there were not always negative things happening in my life when I was growing up. There were some things that it kind of falls into a spiritual state where, you know, I was kind of a very curious kid when I was growing up. So I would go on camping trips, and then my mother would get my brothers to shake me down because I'm always trying to carry animals or something I would find. I would always try to carry something inside the house, so they would literally shake me down, and things would be falling out, and they would, you know, people would be screaming. But this particular piece is Tree 1, and Tree 1 or Tree 2. Both of these two. If you see one is in the back, that's another one. That's 2 or A or B. These two pieces are about like a situation that we used to do when I was a little kid. We had to burn our garbage in our yard, and there was a situation where there was this tree, this really large tree that were in the back of our yard. And what we would do when something would die, or I would do it in particular, I would bury it beneath this tree. And the idea behind it was I wanted to give it a life, or sort of to resurrect it. So it would be a dead thing, but by the fact that it was buried beneath the tree, it would sort of grow back out. So I think that the spirit of these things will still exist in nature. And so these ideas will come in. And most of these ideas in this particular show is, I look at it more as a positive, a statement, as something that to take a situation that normally I would think that would be negative and finding a way to communicate it and to turn it around and make it into a positive situation.
Yeah, here's the one the museum acquired. Maybe, Bill, do you want to say something about representing Dexter's work?
Sure. This particular piece came from the last show about a year and 9 months ago at the gallery, and it means a lot to me in a number of ways. I've had galleries and not had galleries, worked for other people, and I'm at my present location for about 5.5 years now, and after a little bit of a distance, Dexter and I got back together with the show. And we talked back and forth about the show for a couple of years before it came to fruition. And another artist who I'd shown through the years was Carol Castle, who also was a teacher of Dexter's at the Cleveland Institute of Art. He started teaching there in the 1950s and continued into the 1990s. And one of the things that Dexter's pieces do is they pull ideas together out of all sorts of different kinds of materials. And I think that one of the reasons we brought in one of the pieces is so that you can have that direct experience of the work of art in the back, that it's just not the it's very interesting with all these pieces. If you're a distance from them, you see the graphic qualities, and as you get closer, you can see just a wonderful density of textures and materials. And there's Carol Castle, who one of the things I do with people who come into the gallery, they say, well, where does this work come from? I said, well, from everything. You walk through the Cleveland Museum of Art and you see some of the things that have influenced Dexter. But there's also Carol, I can sometimes bring out one of Carol's pieces and put it next to Dexter's, and they don't look anything like each other. But there's ideas that you can see flowing through the way that they use motions. The heads are very, this idea of a head figure, and human figures are very important in both of them. When I showed Dexter's work in the 1990s, he sort of extended himself quite a bit and bought a print called Icarus, which was one of Carol's most important, probably was Carol's most important piece. It was a very small edition of about 15 or 20 from the 1950s. A wonderful etching, had won an award in the May show, and Dexter had one of Dexter's prized possessions. And in a fire in his apartment, there was water damage, and the piece got ruined, but Dexter saved parts of it and then brought it back into the piece, which you can see at the very, very top of it. So it's sort of Icarus flying again. And this is very typical of the work, that there are pieces from different people that Dexter knows that shows up in the work, that there's parts of the life. The hand, one of the things that's typical of the work is that I really, Dexter, I don't know when you started doing that. I made up a story about this to everybody. I say that when you were in school, that you sort of didn't like a print, you started tearing it apart, and you started collaging it into your other work.
Very true.
And then in the last couple decades, what he's done is the bits of woodcut that you see in the piece aren't really made to be prints. They're made and then they're torn up and then they're reassembled in other ways. And even in one of the pieces, the his own handprint, his palm print at the very left, he uses his palm as a matrix to make the print. So it's a sort of collection. The pieces become a collection of life and responses to life and responses to materials in different times.
I might just say that this is the piece that was acquired by the Cleveland Museum of Art, and Heather Lamonides deserves a lot of credit because she was the person who first really noted this piece and felt that it had to be in the museum, and went through the sometimes labyrinthine process of getting the museum to acquire it, which, and you've got some stories about meeting people who are looking at this.
Oh yeah, it's just wonderful. I mean, it's a wonderful situation to be in, to be a part of the museum family, to be your work to be in the museum family. I mean, most of the guys I know from the Institute, Cleveland Institute of Art, only dreamed to have a piece of artwork that would be displayed inside the institution. I think that at the time I was there when, and this is on view right now for those people who are interested in seeing the piece, it's out in the Cleveland Gallery, which I'm really proud to be a part of. But when it first was on view last year, I believe, there were just people, and once in a while, my department would put me somewhere near the piece so I can enjoy it, of course. But it just was wonderful. You know, it was one of those things. Once you're a part of something that's greater than you can imagine, it's like you don't really have to brag about it. You can just sit there and just watch people. You know, it's like it's just a reality. It's there. You don't need to have to worry about talking about it. But for those people that recognized me and knew my work, they were astounded. They could not believe it. And I think some people from around the world, there were people from Chile, there were people from Japan. I mean, they just were just so excited to see a living artist in the museum with their work on a wall. I mean, they were just, I had families that maybe take pictures with them with the work. I mean, and when it's a wonderful experience, a completely wonderful experience. And this is like the beginning of, after I had graduated from the Institute, unfortunately, my mother had passed away, and I was a wreck, and everybody was watching for me, and I had left and went to Columbus to stay with my sister, you know, and I got back and my father passed away. It's like, you know, it was like a double whammy, and so I just I didn't do anything for a while, but then a friend of mine named Kushmir Bell, who's also a graduate from the Institute, is a photographer. We ended up crossing roads again, and we sort of like got a place and we stayed together, and we started creating our own art shows, and it's like one of those things when you don't have a venue, you have to make one for yourself. And my mother and my father always instilled that to me. It's like if you have to do it so badly, you will find an audience for it. And the Grog Shop, bless her soul, Kathy, and she's in the newspaper too. It's like her 20th anniversary in Grog Shop. So bless her soul, she helped us. You know, all these different venues that were unlike what you would think somebody would use to display art. And it worked. And I think most cases, if you think of anything in art history, a lot of the artists actually did the same thing. A lot of people made venues for themselves. This particular one was down in the Colonial Arcade. It's called Life from Death. Like, all my things were based off of just taking this thing that most people would disregard and making you see it, making you pay attention to it. One of the interesting things about this particular photograph, that's me, of course, with a hair at one time, is this particular show was done in the I think it was February. It was one of those years where it was just extremely cold, and the weatherman was like, "Don't go out if you don't have to, please." I'm like, "No, I have an art show tonight," and so no one came out. And the only people that actually was in my show, because it was located downtown, were homeless people, because it was like the only thing that was open before the shelters opened. The shelters were still closed, so they had to find somewhere for warmth, and they came into the Colonial Arcade, and then they saw my show. So I'm in there with all the homeless people, and they loved it. One of the best critics I ever had. So that was a wonderful experience there.
It's something, Dexter, when did you decide to become an artist, and how did that happen?
Well, my father was an artist, and he was sort of like a Renaissance man. He was a lot of things. The funny thing about him, he loved jazz, but he couldn't play. But he would buy instruments and everything. We had this whole room full of instruments, but my father couldn't play one lick. You know. But he was a good artist. He was a good draftsman. He liked architecture, and I think I got that from him because my brothers, all of them sort of fell into the same situation. My brothers were drawers, and I became an artist. But I didn't think of being an artist as a professional artist. I thought of it as just a hobby. And I said if I was going to go to school for something like art, it would be more like applied art, illustration, layouts or something like that, industrial design or something. But it kind of was one of those things that you don't really know it comes for you. It's your calling. And over the years, I kept running away from it, but it kept coming back to me. I would go in a full circle, and it would come right back. And then I knew there was something to it. And then another thing, because of my background and all the different things that I experienced, I didn't realize I had a thing for psychology too, because when you get into situations and it gets really bad, you need to find some place where you can go to just clear your mind. Somehow you have to find something. And I realized my art was the thing that saved me. It was the thing that was there for me. It was that room where nothing can get inside but me. And I was able to actually find that it was a good thing for me. And it helped me a lot. And as you can see, I'm here, and it's wonderful to be here. Now it's the show at MoCA, a wonderful show, a wonderful show. That was a mid-year retrospective that Jill Snyder put on for me, and very beautiful show. And there's a lot of the works that were in that show are no longer around, but I remember it was a very big deal, and they were like, Sunday, like one of the first writings about me. That was it when you had your, I had the show in your gallery. That's the gallery that was up in Murray Hill.
Any questions from the audience? I mean, we can keep talking, yes.
I would like to ask Bill, how you discovered Dexter's work. When did you first meet him?
I always like, when I'm picking or selecting work to show at the gallery, I guess it's not even work, it's to selecting artists. I like to start by seeing art that's being shown in the community, that's being shown out there. I think that art is part of a dialogue, and artists that are participating in that dialogue, people are talking about them. People will come to see them. You know, I always say that nobody comes to the gallery based upon my good looks and winning personality. They come to see the work of artists. They're responding to things. I actually first, it was through Julie Fehrenbach that we were working on a show together about 92, 93, which turned out to be an incredibly important show at Spaces. We were doing a show called Cleveland X, Artists from a Late Industrial City. And it was Spaces Gallery is an artist-run space. Occasionally, before that and since that, has done shows of younger artists who are just getting their starts. And so we were looking at a lot of different people. There was a curatorial team. Julie Fehrenbach was the associate director there. Curly Raven Holton was on that team. And Julie had bought this wonderful piece by Dexter, and I didn't think it was so wonderful at the time. And I would say, well, why is that there? I've been quoted as in Cleveland Magazine as calling it grotesque. But having grown up in as an English major, grotesque had a slightly different meaning for me. It's not only disturbing, but there's also a sense of beauty and ingenuity to it as well. But I wasn't quite totally comfortable with it. But like a lot of work, I think that the way that you understand art is by allowing yourself to have some direct experience of it. And that happened during that show, and Dexter and I started talking, and I knew he was an artist that I'd like to do an exhibition of, and pretty much on and off ever since we've been doing things together, and have sometimes it's been at a gallery that I've run, and sometimes it's been like when I worked with you at Mather Gallery here at Case Western Reserve, where I installed the show. But we've had a great deal of. It's always been interesting between the two of us, going back and forth. I would like to say that, sometimes you look back on a show and you say, how did you do that? And that was that Cleveland X show. It was 15 artists. And one of the artists, Derek Hess, became an internationally known poster and rock and roll artist. Another artist in the show, Kevin Everson, has wound up in the Whitney Biennial, the major survey of American art at the Whitney Museum in New York, a couple times, and showing at the Pompidou Center. It turned out to be quite a good selection that we came up with.
And this is the piece of your.
That came from the show at the gallery, and our first show together. And I usually sort of wait a little bit. I have a rule: I don't buy any art from the gallery that isn't there for 60 days. But I think I broke it with this one, and it's in my breakfast room. And I don't know. I don't really analyze the pieces so much. I like Dexter's sense of mystery and magic that are in all of them. The body parts, the collage elements that are up at the top. It's to me, it still is in that realm of mystery that you have that opportunity to find. I don't know. It's a spiritual sense, I would suppose.
Oh, definitely. It's actually based off of an idea of spirituality out of a situation that's based off of religion, but it's like a spontaneous thing that you feel and you get. One of the things I like about what I do is that there's no rules really to it. It's like instinct. You just know it's right. I have been educated. I went to the Cleveland Institute of Art and everything, but there's this thing after a while, especially in terms of the psychological situations that I've been through. You have to find whatever matter to work to make something, to activate energy force to make something alive. And sometimes it's a very simple thing you do, or sometimes you take forever to do it, whatever it takes. And so every piece is different. It's almost like what Henry had mentioned, like a shaman. It's like whatever works to activate the spirit. It may not be like a traditional type material, whatever, but it still have whatever ingredients in it that's necessary for that spirit force to exist. And these pieces are like that. It's like I'm taking my energy and transfer into the work. This particular one comes out of an interesting situation, very quick situation that I encountered at the museum. Leaving the museum on my lunch break, and this was years ago when I did this piece, but there was one of the religious people, what do they call them, Jehovah's Witness, was walking around in the area, and the lady said, "Would you like to be born again?" I said, "Sure." So she gave me a pamphlet, and it said, "New Birth." So I look at it as more of something that's more spiritual and sort of inside of you.
What's the meaning of the hands? You use hands a lot.
I think that there's a lot of imagery that I use a lot, but what I do when I use these images, they're not like sometimes. I think when I first started out academically, when I was doing these things, I was trying to simplify and say, well, how much information do you really need for whatever this thing that I'm trying to do? And it goes in circles, because there's always be hands, faces, eyes, whatever. And so I try to break it down to the most basic things that I need for the particular piece. And sometimes my thinking is sometimes hands is not hands. It looks like hands, but it acts as something else. It's like a symbolic of something that looks like hands. For us, you see hands, but somehow when you look at the entire piece, it gives a whole statement. Everything is there. And the hands was a necessity for that particular piece. But the way I look at it, the hands could be like a body. The hands can be like something, a different part of a bigger body or piece. I'm not sure if you understand what I'm saying, but sometimes the reason why I use hands, because every time I use it, it's a different symbol. It's symbolically different. It's not exactly, I don't look at it as hands.
I was interested in some of these heads, and I unfortunately just have a slot of one of them, but you did this in a series of 12.
Yeah, the 12 dead comes from also like this repetitive thing you always see in the news, and you see these stories over and over and over again. And then you live in a neighborhood and you see things actually happening. Then you hear the news and you see what was really going on. You just get sort of weighted down with the idea of what is being said and what is actually being done. 12 dead is just actually taken from a headline, 12 dead. And it's just it becomes so mundane that people don't even care anymore. They see a plane crash and, they say these headlines and they become, it becomes sort of, you see it all the time, that it becomes almost like numbing. You don't even feel that there's really people dead. But in my case, I use the title, but there are people that I know. And most of the people that are in 12 Dead series are people that I see all the time, but no one knows who they are. They're sort of John Does, James Does, or whatever. But they're people that they're dead and no one would ever know or care. So I just put them in a series called 12 Dead.
And how did you move from one image to another in this series? Do you work on several at once? Do you do one
I
at a
usually
time?
work simultaneously on every works that I do. I mean, I work in series, so when I'm thinking of something, it's always going to be as a group. And so when I do work, I usually work simultaneously. I work on as many things I can work at the same time. I go back and forth, and it's almost like a Jackson Pollock. I go crazy. I mean, moving everywhere. And I usually play like loud music, have TVs on, all kinds of white noise going on while I'm working. And those things sort of make me focus in what I'm trying to do. It's how you go through a trance. The interesting thing about being an artist, the idea of creativity is beyond and bigger than us. It's like it's something that no one can really put their finger on, but it's there and you can feel it. You can feel the creative process is happening, but it's something that I think if you ask any other artist, they would be like, there's no word for it. It's just an experience that you go through. And when I do these series, that's what happens. I have these things; they're all done. In some cases, simultaneously, I'll be working back and forth. And I look at them and see them as together. They're like whole. They all sort of come together as a group or a family.
Do you ever think I've never asked you this, when that series came into the gallery and there it was putting up on the wall and the titles were 12 Dead 1 and then 12 Dead 2 and 12 Dead 3 and so forth to 12. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you ever think about how saleable this is?
I don't know.
No, I'm serious. What I'm talking about is there's always an expectation of an audience. Yeah. And there's the hope that the few sales will supplement your income a little bit. But but do you think about what do you think about in terms of an audience or what do you listen to how people respond to your work? Do you think about the audience as you're making it, or is it an inner dialogue that you're working
I think it's more like an inner dialogue. I'm pretty selfish. I think when I do what I do it mainly for myself. I don't really care about what people think, because it's like a personal thing. I don't know how to really explain it. It's just something it's spiritual. It's highly personal. It's like a ground that no one can cross. It's your own space. And I mean, and what is great when people do love what I do. I mean, I feel blessed when people can actually identify that kind of experience once it's done. But when I actually do these things, I'm not thinking of nobody but me. I'm just selfish. It's me.
So are you saying that when you do a series, you have to buy the entire series, and you won't break them up?
Well, that's me and Bill. I actually, I think that, it's kind of, it's like, I don't really think of it as, I know there's groups and stuff, but they can't act upon as an individual piece too. But, it'd be great if people wouldn't break them up, but keep them as a group. That'd be great, but,
That's one of the things of the history. Art is filled with works done in series that are individual pieces. Sometimes it goes the other way too, where an artist does work in a series and says it can be broken up and somebody buys the whole thing. And there we go.
Right.
Now, with the 12 dead, some of them are very recognizable heads, and some of them you need to look at them for quite a while
Right.
before you figure out where the head is.
Right.
And did you work in some kind of series with that?
Yeah, I
or,
think that as I was working, the more you work on something, you go from whatever the first and you end up with the last, but it becomes so undescriptive when you get to the last whatever. It's just because of your mind constantly trying to find another way, you know.
So you were using more freedom at the
Yeah,
end.
exactly. You trust yourself more and more, and then you start to just break it down to almost to
Because in
just
some
purely
ways, the most
abstraction.
expressive ones are
Right.
the ones where at first you don't even see
Right,
there's a head
exactly.
there, and then it sort of comes out in this
You
weird
know,
way.
you start with something and then you sort of just break yourself down to just the basics of what you really want. And that's what I did with the 12 series.
You have a rich career behind you, so you're at a point where you can kind of sum that up. But then, do you see certain directions opening up ahead of you, or do you not plan?
You know what? I have an idea, but I have an idea of what I like and where I would like to go. But I'm also being realistic about, you know, my situation too. So I sort of like, you know, working it and just one of the most important things I have to say, and especially for young artists, is always keep yourself out there. Don't hide and become some closet artist. You know, you want people to see you. You have to get involved. You got to get involved with people. You got to involve everything and possible. One of the things that I done went throughout my career, I got involved with everything. Matter of fact, before I even started doing art on a regular basis, after I came back from Columbus, I would go to every art show. I would see everybody. I would be involved in all kinds of community things. I taught at places like Garden Valley Community City, which was a horrible place, but I even had to bring my own supplies for the kids. I mean, I just got involved with everything. And I think that when you keep your options open like that, you know, anything can happen. Okay.
What artists influence you?
Oh, I have
in the past.
a whole array of artists. I was just going through a whole library, you know, at one point, and but you know, I always look for some people that they're obscure, but I always find myself going back to people that I started out with, and I mean, I can go with Picasso, which was interesting when Henry put that up, and. So that was one of the people I always find. And the La Vie, the one we have at the museum, is one of the things I always go to look at. Because that is the idea of creativity. I mean, how much he changed throughout the whole time. I mean, that is something that is fascinating to me. You know, and there's other artists like de Kooning. I mean, I always like the abstract expressionists, and Philip Guston was another person that I always found myself looking at. And first it was his abstractions, and I went into like his more figurative type works. You know, some of the London School people, and obviously the Cobra School.
I was just going to say, a phenomenon is that guards in art museums are often kind of interesting people, and you often have artists. I remember at the Nelson Atkins Museum, there was a very talented guy who painted tornadoes and also used to play the bagpipes in the main hall of the museum when the museum was closed, because his neighbors didn't appreciate it when he played the bagpipes, and that was a place where he could do it. And these are some of the other guards who are artists at the museum. It's interesting, they all have green faces. They clearly came down from Mars. How has being a guard affected you? And you know, you get to stand there for hours looking at works of art.
Well, you know, it's wonderful to be a part of a great institution like the museum, and I'm so happy that this renovation thing it's becoming very complete. And you know, people just love it. I hear people talking about it all the time, and you know, I think that having such a strong institution, you know, it's going to bring more and more people. And as you know, to work there as a security guard gives me a little space to do what I do. You know, I feel like I'm in a position where it's stable, and I can venture off and tap into this creativity source. And the museum is a perfect place to have reference and get reference from that. Just the collection itself helps me to engage in my own creativity when I'm looking at all the wonderful collections that we have in our museum. It's just it's mind-boggling because you just realize how much you have where you are. You know, and I've seen a lot of people come, a lot of people go, and I think like my fellow co-workers, and most of them have graduated from Institute also. You know, it's this wonderful thing when you get a group of people and you have a dialogue going on, is that we kind of encourage each other. You know, it's almost like we're compatible, yet we still are, you know, together as a family. And I think that keeps the juices going.
But one other thing, there was a question about Dexter's influences. One of the things that I've noticed as I've worked with artists through the years is that's in common among almost all successful artists I've ever worked with, is they've all known a huge amount about art. They're all very current, no matter what work they do, whether it's very traditional or very contemporary, they're all very well versed and are aware of what other people are doing. It's the people who work alone and who never talk to anybody else. The work, some strange stuff happens to the work, and it becomes more and more personal. But I do remember, Dexter, when I at the first show of your work, there was a librarian present who worked at the Cleveland Museum of Art, and she walked into the show, and she'd been to the gallery a number of times, and she just saw you and said, I always wondered who that guard was who was always in the museum library. So it's part of it.
It's a fun thing, you know, having to be in an incredible place where you can just, you know, pick and choose. You can go and see any gallery, see whatever that get you going, get your blood going. You know, it's a wonderful thing. I mean, like, you know, despite all the things that, you know, you experience, being negative or positive, you have to find a way just to generate yourself, you know. And I'm happy to be able to do this. And I really thank Henry for allowing me to be able to do this, because that's what I'm talking about. That's the link. That's what it's about. It's, you know, it's communication, it's education, and it's discovery.
Do you want to tell us a bit about this one?
Oh yeah, this is also based off, and you know, like the show I'm in right now at Bill's Gallery. It's like there's two parts to the whole show. One is about things that actually happened to me in terms of literally things that I saw happen, and then others it's like I'm not sure what it is. It's like it's things that happen, but it's like done in such a way that it's got ghosts or something. You're not really sure if you're dreaming or if it's a recurring situation that was so dramatic that your mind has it and you don't know what's going on inside of you. It keeps reoccurring in your mind. And only my dreams is about a situation where I'm not sure if I experience a ghost. And it can be based off what Henry mentioned about the guy's body being thrown out in front of my house. I never seen the guy's face though, but I mean, I ran away when I saw it. But I mean, maybe there was some kind of psychological thing that happened to me, and I've been having these dreams back when, you know, during this time, and I remember these things, and they always look like they're faces, but they're not faces. And
you told me a couple of ghost stories about where you grew up too.
Yeah, in East 89th and Huff, the house, you know, there was something going on with the house, and there were just strange things occurring, and my brothers had told me about there's another image that is in Bill Buster Gallery called Head and Foot, and it was this occurring situation where every time he would go to sleep, something would drop out the wall. I mean, it would be like a head would fall out, you know, and he would be, you know, he was telling me this thing kept happening to him, and it would be a foot would fall out and fall on the bed and fall off the bed, and then, or a head would fall off the bed, and he said a foot would walk up and go right back into the wall. I mean, just these weird things. It would be like fragments of this and that. And, you know, with the thing that occurred to me was just like, you know, it's almost hard to say if it's real or not. When I saw this thing and this ghost or whatever, and I was a little kid at the time, and I still say to myself, if my sister opened her eyes, we could both say if it was true or not. But I was with my sister at that time, and I was like basically much of a baby. But she wouldn't wake up. She said she was awake, but she didn't open her eyes, so she was afraid. But these things are interesting phenomena. I mean, I think of these things and I say to myself, what really was this? Was it a psychological thing that happened to me when I was a kid, when all these horrible things that happen, and your mind has to find a way of dealing with it? It could be that, could it be these little echoes that keep occurring, and you have to find some way of figuring it out.
And there were people standing across the street at one point.
Yeah, it was just things go. They were like a Victorian type family that actually came into the house at one time, and my brothers said they were so horrified they tried to hide from them. But once they would be discovered, they said they would just vanish. They would go away.
May I ask another question about this piece?
Okay.
The surface of it seems so unusual for you. I don't ever remember seeing a piece that had this surface. It was something that something was going on in the way you mix things that almost sucked me into the piece. It was incredible.
When I did this piece, and like I said, I work in a series, and what I did, because I'm trying to regurgitate this stuff back and try to put it into a context that I remember feeling it as, and so I think I started working in different ways, somewhat traditional. I wanted to have a whole body of information that I made for some of the work, because I would later go back and tap into that information. So I made inventory of things. I made faces and things, and then I looked at these things, and then if it worked for that particular thing, I would just mess around with it, and sometimes it would happen. Like with this particular piece, it was sort of done in such a way it just came to life. And I love it when it happens, but it doesn't happen all the time. And it's very, like we said, very unlike what I would do, because it's very smooth. There's not a lot of texture and stuff, but it worked. I mean, I do not mess with anything that has a life force. And once its eyes open up and it pinches my nose or whatever, I let it live. It's my baby. I let it live. It's not. I don't try to dig in. I just do another one and see how far that one will go.
Now, at one point you were working with bones and animal bones and things like that.
Oh, that was a very terrible time. That was a time after my mother's death and my father's death, and I was basically isolated. There was a girl I knew. She let me stay up in her house, and then she moved out because the neighborhood was so bad. She was horrified, so she left me there. So I was up there by myself in this place, and I was by myself. I was alone. There was nobody. I had no money. I was poor. I was horrifyingly depressed. I was dying basically inside. And then I started getting involved with this ritual thing, because I have nothing to really work with, so I had to find things. Then I started finding common things that I have around me. And you think of a ritual, it's kind of like every morning we all do the same thing when we go to work. We get up, we do these various tasks and things, we get out the door, get our car keys. Well, I looked at it like that. I made a ritual out of that situation to keep myself afloat. It was very difficult, but then I got really obsessed. And the lady that lived below me, who her sister owned the house, they really were fond of me. They knew I was behind rent and everything. But she was kind of worried about it. She said, "Mr. Davis, I noticed you carrying buckets of sand up to your door. What are you doing with it?" I was carrying sand, carrying leaves. I started getting so involved. It's almost like that movie Close Encounters, when the guy was building that. That's how I was at that time. I was just grabbing all kinds of stuff, putting it together, and it became actually a series of work that was very intense and very strange. And I got a call one time during that time period. I was at work part-time at the museum, and they said, "It's like, landlady's calling you. They said something's wrong with your apartment." And I forgot the lady went up there to fix a pipe, and I had all this stuff like bones and teeth and hair. She was horrified. She was like, "What are you into?" And I told her, it's art. It's like art thing. She was just kind of like, art? But you know, I mean, I did go really like as far as I could go with that particular
and didn't someone
series.
send you a package at the museum at
Exactly.
one point?
That's when I got to the peak of the series. I had befriended at the garage shop a guy, and he was like a rock and roller, but I think he was a little bit something, you know, and he was really into what I was doing. So we were talking about these different things for the Ritual series, and one day I got someone called me down into the coat check. They said there's somebody that left a gift for you in a shoebox. I said, what? And I went down there, and when I checked, it was he had placed a German Shepherd's head inside a shoebox, which it kind of blew my mind. I'm like, oh my God. Well, I mean, I didn't think that that would happen, but I mean, I was in a ritual, but I didn't think it was to bring it to the museum or whatever like that. But I mean, that art, when I think of it, it was necessary for me to do. I had to get to this extreme because of the situation in my life at the time. And it was like, I look at it and say to myself, I'm not sure how much of it was art, but it was necessary. I just felt that I had to do something. I was reaching out for life. I was reaching for my life, reaching for life to get the source, the life source, taking these things, the objects or whatever they may be that's dead, and sort of creating them and giving them life again. Headhunter was done around that same time, but Headhunter came a little later when I was coming back to regular realization of life and people. But Headhunter was.
Say, you seem to have sort of two styles because one is very layered and collage.
Yeah,
and the other is very
Headhunter.
much
All the body, the bones and stuff that I used was before. It was after. I think this was after that, and. But Headhunters was getting back to a situation where it was just a thing about religion and my mother, and when somebody die in your life, they never go away. You have them in your heart forever, and some things can make the situation reoccur. It could be anything. It could be a light reflected on a wall or whatever, and and then you become like really stuck in this state. But this Headhunter was actually about relationships and how I felt like at that time in my life there was a lot of rocky roads, and I mean, when I had this particular piece at the MoCA retrospective show, there were several elementary schools that I had to cater to because it was some kind of thing they had me do, babysit in certain schools, and I would go over and talk to kids and make a program for them, and these kids were very smart. I was trying to cover things up. They kept getting me every time I tried to cover something up. What is that? We know what that is, and blah blah blah. With this particular piece, they were like pointing at various things that you can't really see on the slide, but. There was these things that I was talking about in terms of relationships, and Headhunter is basically looking for a companion, a true love, and during that time in my life, it was all this craziness, and I had put pornography at the bottom part of it, and of women's heads just cut off, basically their heads cut off, because to me it represented artificial love. And the kids got it like that. I tried to cover up, but the kids knew exactly what, the situation was. So basically, Headhunter, it's like the ritual of finding, somebody or some companion. There was another, I don't know if Henry has it, there's another.
I was curious about this one. It's a great image. What's this one about?
This one is also that idea of, is based off the War series. Mental circus is the breakdown when someone is put in a position and things just cannot get right. It gets to that degree of just total anarchy, and in my mind, most of these images, the idea behind them, not necessarily is a physical outburst, but an actual mental breakdown. I mean, some people can just stand and look like they're perfectly normal, but inside of them, there's like this horrible thing going on. And that's what the mental circus was about. It was about like knowing how it feels to be empty, and people looking at you, they have no idea what's going on with you. And mental circus is like that. It's all inside of you. But there's a piece, I don't know if you have it here, it's called Nosebleed. I don't know if you have that one.
No, I didn't have
But that one was another one that was interesting because the students would not, they kept bothering me about this piece. I'm trying to run away from it. The kids kept pulling me back to the piece. And one of the things that I found out when I did a work plan for the kids, they all wanted to do Nosebleed. I'm like, come on, you kids. And but the thing behind Nosebleed, which is a very serious situation that happened to me, when I lived in this place I was telling you about up in Cleveland Heights, I was coming home from work one night, and in that area up in, on the Superior side of Mayfield, there were gangs. And I always told myself, you know, to go, there's a certain way you go and get into the neighborhood without interfering in the territory. But that day I was so tired, I cut through and I got jumped and beaten almost to like oblivion. And then my friend, people that in the neighborhood found me. And then my thing was, I thought that I couldn't feel my face, and I had a white shirt on. It was totally covered with blood. And they knew who was responsible, but the guys talked me out of it, because then the thing happened to me. When you become a victim, what channels in your mind you want to revenge, you want to stop it. You don't want to be a victim. But they talked me out of it because they love me as an artist. They said that you have too much to live for. Don't go back there. Don't seek revenge, because these guys, they'll get you. You know, you can't, you know, they have their situation. They know how to deal with the streets. And I don't in the sense of how they do. They're organized. But I'll never forget Nosebleed because it was about that. Matter of fact, in Nosebleed, the actual shirt is in collage in the piece with the blood all over it and stuff.
You might say something you mentioned to me when you were at the Cleveland School of Art. You were living pretty close to where you are now, weren't you? And you'd walk over through the neighborhood?
Right. When I was over on Carnegie, and I was like, actually, it was kind of nice because when I was over there, I could actually see my mural that was on the School of Art. I could walk out, have a cup of coffee, and just salute up my mural. I mean, it was like one of those accomplishments that you just don't forget. You can see something; it reminds you of what you have done. It was a wonderful thing to be in that situation. But the Carnegie area wasn't that bad. It was actually, I would have stayed there, but it just that we had slumlords, and I had to get out there because it was just getting really bad with the people keeping up the space, and then there were a couple break-ins and all kinds of little crazy things like that.
Chris Pico's got a question.
I wanted to find out what happened to that mural on the side of it.
You know what? I called in. I can't think of the name of the guy that was responsible. Was an architect, but they never gave me an answer. He said that they have it in storage, but they never told me what was going to happen. I think that what I was told when the mural was on the wall at the School of the Arts before the renovation, I was told that they were going to use it for an anniversary type thing when they get a bunch of different things happening. But Mark Howard, who also did a mural before I did, he said they're going to reduplicate his mural inside the atrium area of the school.
If you're familiar with the Cleveland School for the Arts, there were two different major public art pieces. As you're going up toward Cleveland Heights from the museum, there was a painting by Mark Howard. If you're going along Carnegie toward Cleveland Heights, there was a large mural actually on a fabric piece that was on the back of the school, which was Dexter's piece.
Other questions? We've got just a few minutes, and if anyone's got.
Dexter, I have a question. One of the issues that happens at the Cleveland, when you were a student at Cleveland School for the Arts, how did it feel to be, and there weren't many other African American students there?
You mean the Institute, right?
I'm sorry, the Cleveland Institute of Art, right?
When I was there, it was making the transition from the neighborhood. I mean, You know what? It's an interesting thing because when I had a scholarship to go abroad through the Cleveland Institute of Art to France, I think I had one of those. Those are one of the years. It was like around 87, 88. One of the things that was one of the most memorable things in my life, being abroad, because it was such a different experience from being in a sort of a caste environment. That I would recommend if I was like a millionaire, I would send kids over abroad to just get an experience. And it changed my life. It really did. I mean, there was people that were just like incredible. I mean, I just met so many different people in one area. And they were just really good people. They wanted to talk. They wanted to converse. They weren't afraid of you. Matter of fact, some of them were so close to you, you're like, wait a minute, But it was a wonderful experience. I mean, it was a wonderful experience. I remember some of the guys, the little Brits, were like, Dexter, you're brilliant. I thought that was wonderful. And we used to go up to the chateau and we would play music. And some of the other college kids were afraid of the gypsies. I was dancing with the gypsies. They were great. I mean, just understanding where I come from, I understand people are people. And I think that when I was over there, I was able to express myself even more. And I really had a great experience. When I came back to Cleveland, it was sort of like this culture shock thing, coming back into the neighborhood, and then I kind of like lost it for a second because I remember going to the projects and telling the guys how great it is if you guys can get out of this little area. But they had no understanding what I was talking about, completely no understanding. It was some way I felt if I could make them understand, if I could just plug my head into theirs and see that, let them see that experience, it would be much different in terms of how they felt about the situation. But as far as the Institute of Art is concerned, when I first started there, I think one of the things I liked the most about the Cleveland Institute of Art was the fact that there were people from all around the world, once again, that were top people that came to the school, and I met a lot of different people around the world, and we collaborated. And one of the things I can say about art is, it doesn't matter where you're from. Artists sort of have this weird, like, karma. Artists know artists, and you can collaborate. It's like you don't have to. The other person doesn't even speak my English, and we can still collaborate because there's some kind of spiritual connection. It's just somehow we know. And but as far as being an African American there. The worst thing I got was just, to me, it was just like, people just outside of the actual institutions, when they see you coming through and they're not used to seeing certain people looking a certain way, you get kind of like this static. At the time I used to get this kind of static from the university cops and things like that. And, you have to like roll with the punches, they say. But, I had some cop that was so willing to get me. It was just unbelievable. He was obsessed with me. I'm like, I'm not the only black person here. I'm looking around. He wants something, I want you. I was like, Jesus. This guy harassed me for my first year in college in '85. And I was just like, I was not afraid of him because I'm used to seeing a lot of different things. I think he was actually afraid of me. And I mean, there was times when I remember being in a bar with my fellow college friends, and he would be staring at me. He would unbuckle his gun belt. I mean, it was just incredible. It was really incredible. And he went away. Things like that, you just have to just ignore it. You keep yourself focused. And and work for the goals you work for. The people like that won't stay forever. They'll fade. Because I've been through a lot of strange people in my life, and I have to say there's more beautiful people that I met than strange people. Like you guys, all beautiful people.
You want to say something about this Bush Baby one, then we'll wrap it up.
Bush Baby is about that situation, which I use the term Bush, which. I'm phrasing it like the jungle, and the city is like that. And I met a lot of people, like the Dead series. I met a lot of people that, that I think, when I truly think about them now, I think that they really want to live, they really want to survive, but they were so in the bush, which means the ghetto, that you look in their eyes and there was nothing there left. It was just, they got just completely just consumed, by everything that maybe that happened in their lives. And this is basically about those people. They're called them Bush Baby because they're just they just, you can drive by areas. I can go by areas. I know what I see. I know what is what. When I see somebody, I understand. And, most people would not even notice them because they're so sort of engrounded in this environment, they're almost invisible. I mean, they almost become part of the bush. And it breaks my heart because I think deeply inside there's something there still with some people, but it gets to a point where you have to save yourself, because if you get too close, they will pull you in. So I try to do the best I can do. But this is my way of communicating how I feel and what I experience, and I hope that people can get the most out of it.
Well, why don't we wrap up there, but Dexter's right here, so you can still talk to him one-to-one. And thanks very much.